A few weeks ago, Bill Maher publicly reminded Donald Trump that he, Maher, was probably the only prominent liberal in America that somewhat or tentatively supported Trump's disastrous war against Iran. Well, 2 weeks later, the war has gotten so much more disastrous that even Maher is tapping out, throwing in the towel in the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, urging Trump to get the hell out of Iran because he has failed. Also on this episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, liberal veteran and political activist Paul Rieckhoff brutally humiliated Trump's British apologist, conservative stooge, Douglas Murray, in a debate about the Iran war, and we have to talk about all of this. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, folks, one of the most frustrating things about Bill Maher is that he has some neoconish instincts, impulses, right? So when Trump went to war against Iran, at least in theory, at least on the premise, Bill Maher was somewhat supportive, entirely too credulous towards Trump as far as I'm concerned. Well, I am pleased to announce that Bill Maher is finally throwing in the towel, saying, you know what, this was a failure, this was a disaster, let's get the hell out. I want to play some clips of this exchange between Maher and Rieckhoff and Douglas Murray about the Iran war. And Rieckhoff in particular gets extremely brutal.
Here we are again, Bill, right? Talking about another unpopular war in the Middle East that most of the country doesn't support. And people that I served with and folks that I know are going to continue to go and fight and die while a lot of the country lives life uninterrupted. There is a reemergence of a new generation of chicken hawks. People who have never served, people who don't have kids in the military, and they're happy to send our men and women to die in a war in the Middle East. But hold on. You found, I guess, the one guy outside of Pete Hegseth who thinks that the last 2 weeks has been a victory. This has not been a victory. I'll give it an incomplete at best. They had a series of shifting rationales, but none of the rationales that even they put forward have been achieved.
So that's Rieckhoff there getting absolutely brutal. When he's talking about chicken hawk, somebody... Again, it's a pun. It's very funny, right? Somebody who's a hawk, somebody who likes to use the military, likes to start wars, likes to ruthlessly prosecute wars, but is a chicken in the sense that they themselves have never served in the military. They've never served in a capacity. He is referring to Douglas Murray there, who had just given a full-throated, enthusiastic defense of Trump's disastrous war against Iran. So Rieckhoff is calling him out to his face that you're a coward, you want to put the lives of others at risk, but you yourself have never served. You apparently have no regard for that whatsoever, to say nothing of the fact that the Trump administration's purported goals are shifting all the time. The regime change one is just a great example. So Trump campaigned on no new wars, no foreign regime change wars. And then when he launched this war against Iran, he said it's not about regime change. And then a few weeks later, he was actively claiming and bragging regime change because he killed the Ayatollah, because there was really nothing else to try to claim or hold to as far as, a major strategic victory. Well, we achieved regime change. It was like, well, I thought you said that wasn't the goal and that's not something you were interested in. Well, it wasn't, but we got it, so that's a feather in our cap. So good on Rieckhoff for just unapologetically making the case that not only is this the sort of forever war that Trump campaigned against, but to the extent that you want to evaluate the war on its merits, nothing of massive strategic import has been achieved.
It has been the consistent policy of Democrat and Republican administrations in this country that the Iranians shouldn't be allowed a nuclear weapon. Firstly, because they're about the only regime on earth that would like to use one and sees mutually assured destruction as a rather attractive proposition.
We can fearmonger and say everybody's going to get it and the nukes are the problem.
But you've got to
the reality is the nukes are still there.
You've got to the world's most dangerous region getting the world's most dangerous weapons would be very undesirable.
I agree with that.
Agree on that?
I agree with that. But here's the point.
What is the one country that can do something about that? America.
He took his shot,
yes,
and he missed. And so how many more shots are we going to take?
That's what I'm saying.
How many more shots are we going to take? And listen, and I think, and I would have argued, if he was going to take, you can make an argument. I don't want them to have a nuke. The question is, can you achieve that objective? And he has failed in achieving that objective. And there's a right way to go about it, to get the country behind it, to get congressional approval, to get an alliance of allies who can stand with us, to have a country that has the stomach for what might be a very long fight. And the biggest mistake a president can make is to send troops before they commit a country.
Which is what he's done. Donald Trump did not get any sort of public support behind this, to say nothing of the fact that, remember, during the 12-day war last year, he said that entire war was predicated on just totally obliterating Iran's nuclear program and the nuclear potential. And after the 12-day war, he said mission accomplished. We totally obliterated their nuclear program, totally obliterated their nuclear potential. And then 9 months later, we're back exactly where we started. So the public wasn't, to the extent that the public was ever particularly inclined to buy what Donald Trump was selling, they were much less inclined to do so when it was like, well, wait a minute. You told us that's why you started the 12-day war last year. And you insisted, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that you objectively 100% totally obliterated their nuclear program, and you were wiping your hands. That was it. So to now say, well, actually, we need a mulligan on that. We need to redo that. No, we're even less inclined to believe you because you were either lying then or you're lying now or both. And that's exactly the posture the American people should have with Trump about everything. He is by far the most pathologically dishonest politician we have ever seen. And this is the most pathologically, reflexively dishonest administration. And yes, it all needs to be called out. This is a wildly unpopular war, far less popular than any war America has ever participated in. The strategic objectives have not been achieved. Douglas Murray can crow all he wants about the necessity to keep nuclear potential out of the hands of the Iranians, but the enriched uranium is still in their possession, number one. Number two, apparently this is the second shot Trump did, in terms of totally obliterating their nuclear potential. He didn't achieve it, and even if he did claim that he did achieve it this time, this time we totally obliterated it, why would we believe you or him when that was what he said in 2025 about the 12-year war? We have absolutely no reason to trust Trump or the Trump administration or Trump apologists like Douglas Murray, quite frankly, and every reason not to. This has been an absolute failure. And you saw Bill Maher. Bill Maher repeatedly throughout the course of this episode, I don't have the clips for you, calls out Trump's war, even though, again, he says, look, I was in favor of it initially because he does hate the Iranian government. And fair enough, the Iranian government sucks. There's also Bill's very twisted relationship and criticism of Islam in particular. As far as like other religions are concerned, I think also clouding his judgment. It's fair to be critical of any religion on the grounds that you're an atheist, right? And you believe it's irrational, whatever, but he has a particular dislike of Islam that I think is clouding his judgment here. Setting that aside for just a moment, even Bill Maher repeatedly throughout this episode is like, yeah, I was at least tentatively supportive of Trump's war. I thought he might screw it up because he's really dumb. And that's precisely what's happened. He took his shot, and that's why he jumped in there and said, yeah, that's where I am. Trump took his shot to try to eliminate Iran's nuclear potential. He's technically had 2 shots. He's failed. It's time to get out, especially because of the domestic economic implications at home. Now, I will say later on in the episode, during his new rule monologue, again, Maher unfortunately gets very callous, very, very callous of talking about the casualties, civilian casualties of war. He references the fact that, again, 160, 170 Iranian schoolgirls were killed, and he does say it's horrific, but he's like, just tough. I mean, it's just civilian casualties happen. He's far too blasé about that sort of shit for my liking when it comes to Iranian schoolgirls or civilians killed by the IDF during the war in Gaza. He's just too blasé about it. Like, I just wish he would, even if he's still supportive of these things, these wars, the war in Gaza and the war against Iran, to at least show some sort of empathy for the civilians. Hundreds of thousands potentially in Gaza. I don't even know what the specific figure is at this point. Hundreds of Iranian schoolgirls, or nearly 200 Iranian schoolgirls, and at least I think 1,500 Iranian civilians, I believe. If you would just, like, at the very least show some more empathy about that. So again, it's very frustrating to hear Bill Maher talk about war. He's become more conservative and more right-wing as he's gotten older. But the reason I wanted to do this video wasn't just to show Paul Rieckhoff totally humiliating the very smug Douglas Murray. That was extremely attractive to see that happen. Like that, I really enjoyed seeing that. But the other thing to consider is that Bill Maher, again, considers himself the only prominent liberal who was supportive of the war, and Trump has even lost Bill Maher, right? And when you lose Bill Maher in 2026 on, declaring war against an Islamic state, you've really screwed up. So, want to share that with you. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.